The GAA off-season has been and gone, and whether you used it as a break or a chance to knuckle down, you know that the new sporting season is on the horizon. And this might bring either a feeling of fear around tough, grueling sessions to come, but it may also hopefully bring a feeling of excitement to get back into some structured training. Either way, there are some unique challenges that come about during the pre-season for GAA players. And I want to give some key points to ensure that your nutrition is supporting your efforts during this time. And I've put together a checklist that will help you do exactly that. And if you tick each of these boxes, you're likely to be in a much better spot come the start of the season. So checklist point number 1 is to address your body composition goals. The best time to have worked on optimizing your body composition would have been during the off season, where you weren't having to worry at all about fueling for team training sessions and matches, and instead you could simply focus on getting that extra layer of body fat off or getting that bit of extra muscle on. And if you did that, fair play to you. But if you didn't, then the second best time to do that is during the pre-season. You might have the concerns of fueling some tough training sessions. You don't have to worry about having to fuel your match performance, which gives you some extra wiggle room. And even if it means having a bit of a tougher pre-season, if it ends up with you going into the season lean and not having to worry about your body composition during the most competitive part of the year, then it's a trade-off you probably be willing to make. I've discussed the principles and strategies around how to drop body fat and gain muscle as an athlete in depth elsewhere, but as a brief overview, the main focus will be on getting your calorie intake to a point where you are dropping body weight steadily without it being so quick as to overly affect your performance and recovery, or gaining muscle steadily without it being so much as to lead to excess body fat gain. And that's usually somewhere in the range of 0.5 to 1.5 body weight loss per week for fat loss, or 1 to 2% body weight gain per month for muscle gain. You'll then want to ensure your macronutrient breakdown of those calories is appropriate, aiming for 2 grams per kg of body weight in order to facilitate recovery or preserve muscle, with carbs and fats making up the remainder of those calories in amounts that will depend on the intensity and the duration of the training you're doing and on your personal preference. Further supporting these goals through adequate intakes of fibre and micronutrients, as well as hydration and supplementation, will also help. Lifestyle factors then, like your sleep and your home and work environment and your stress management, will also play a big role in your ability to sustain those nutritional efforts. Point number 2 is to supply your energy demands. I mentioned the concerns you might have around fueling your tough pre-season sessions and recovering off the back of them. And if you have a body composition goal of getting leaner, you worry that you'll either have to sacrifice performance in these sessions because you're trying to sustain a calorie deficit, or that you'll have to sacrifice your fat loss goals in order to fuel those sessions. Even if you don't have a fat loss goal, you might still have concerns around trying to fuel those sessions whilst avoiding body fat gain. And in either case, the first priority will be to have your average calorie intake in an appropriate place for your goals. But a key strategy that most athletes don't consider is that you can alter your supply of calories based on that day's demands. And here I'm not advising that you try and calculate the exact numbers of how many calories you're burning each day using a smartwatch or something similar, trying to match that exactly, because that's overly complicated and will likely be inaccurate anyway. But instead, a simple method I use with my clients is to have a training day calorie target and a non-training day target. And the idea here is to take your usual average daily calorie target and place your non-training day target below that, and place your training day target above it, aiming to have these average out across the week to match close to that of your initial average target. So for example, if you're aiming to hit on average 2,300 calories in pursuit of a fat loss goal, your non-training day intake might be around 2,100 calories and your training day intake might be about 2,500 calories. Because the average for the week is roughly the same as if you were hitting 2,300 calories each day, your weight loss across that period should be the same. Now, the difference being that in the case where you've allotted your intake based on that day's training, you're going to have more fuel on the days it's needed most and get your fat loss on the days that you don't need as much fuel. Now, of course, there can be some downsides to this approach, mainly where hunger can increase on non-training days due to the lower intake. So the extent to which the intake differs day to day, or your ability to use this approach at all, could be limited by this. But still, there are strategies you can implement to account for this, like increasing your fiber intake on the non-training days, for example. So this approach is very much worth considering if you've not considered it before. Point number 3 is to start building long-term health habits. There's some elements of nutrition that don't have a noticeable impact in the short term, and not having that immediate positive feedback makes it harder to implement them. But you know that if you neglect them, you're going to miss out on the long-term benefits. And here I'm referring to things like having sufficient fiber intake, eating enough fruits and vegetables, health supplementation, things like that. It could also include lifestyle considerations like sleep, hydration, meal prep, and cooking skills. And in the thick of the season, when training ramps up and matches start to come thick and fast, the last thing in your mind is starting to build new habits on top of what you're already doing. So for that reason, starting to get these in place during the pre-season will help them become a natural part of your lifestyle, giving you a chance to sustain them through the season and reap the continued benefits to health, immunity, recovery, and your performance as a result. Point number 4 then is to practice in-season protocols. So as with the long-term health habits, it can be difficult to start implementing new nutritional strategies in the thick of the season. The reduced time and headspace are factors here, but an additional factor is not wanting to implement something that risks messing up your performance when it matters most. So for example, you might not want to start adding in a new pre-performance supplement before a big match, since you can't be 100% sure of what effect it's going to have for you if you haven't tried it before. So for this reason, the pre-season can be a great time to start practicing these nutritional strategies that you hope to implement in this in-season period. And this could include things like carb loading, optimizing your pre-training or pre-match meals, using intra-performance nutrition, things like sports drinks and energy gels, and even experimenting with supplements. So for example, you might have a big training session coming up on a Sunday morning pre-season, and whilst you wouldn't usually need to carb load for it, you could use it as an opportunity to practice how you'll carb load when matches come around. And then in practicing these, I'd recommend certainly taking notes of any struggles, benefits and downsides you experience, so that you can then use those to inform your future efforts when implementing them. Number 5 then is to create a transition plan. It's one thing having a great pre-season where you get super lean, fuel like a champion and look after your health and recovery, but it's another thing to keep that going through the season. This is usually because the focus and demands of these two separate times of years differ. The in-season brings unique challenges mainly around managing the demands of high loads of training and playing, along with the other life demands that can come with the summer months. For example, kids being off school, more social occasions and summer holidays. And that means that the same plan you had through the winter months likely won't work when it comes to summer sport. But if you go into that period prepared, you stand a better chance of having a productive transition where you take the work you've been doing in the off season and continue to bring in key elements of that to the season, whilst allowing some flexibility with certain other aspects. That could look like continuing to monitor your calorie intake, but switching the focus from body composition improvement towards fuel and recovery and body composition maintenance. Or it might look like transitioning from experimenting with your fueling for training to building consistency with an approach that you are going to be repeating for each and every session. Or it might even mean taking into account things like how much focus and effort you're willing to put into your nutrition in general, whether that is allowing more flexibility, having spent the off season knuckling down on it, or on the other end, stepping things up a notch in pursuit of supporting the increased demands on the body. So to summarise, the pre-season presents an opportunity to make necessary body composition improvements given the decreased performance demands compared to the in-season, whilst still requiring fueling and recovery provisions for the tough pre-season sessions. It also presents an opportunity to start building those long-term health habits and practicing in-season nutrition strategies. And finally, creating a plan for transition between the pre-season and the in-season will then improve your chances of maintaining the progress and the habits you've built, allowing you to achieve your potential for the season. Thanks for listening. If you'd like more free resources or info about my performance nutrition coaching program, hit the link in the podcast description.